Man, it's been a while since a manga's made me feel this excited. YuYu Hakusho is the story of a legendary artist finding their voice and honing their craft, not across decades, but months. It has been one of the most fascinating reads I've covered on this channel so far, not so much because of its story initially, but because it has essentially taken me on a meta journey through an author's transition from a romantic comedy writer to a fully fledged master of battle shonen. From his art style to the way he weaves drama through combat, Yoshihiro Togashi has evolved chapter after chapter. And upon hitting the prelude to the subject of this very video, YuYu Hakusho was already feeling like a completely different series. The jump in quality was palpable. But now, heading right into the midst of a story arc I hear is widely considered one of the very best in the genre, I could not be more excited to explore for the very first time the mysterious, brutal, and captivating Dark Tournament arc.
とうとう来るのだ 100% の俺で戦いにしようてめえが捨てたものの重みがようやく分かったぜ俺は捨てねえしがみついても守る裏飯勝てよああ
The end of the prelude to this very story left us on one hell of a cliffhanger. Forced into competing in a terrifying tournament by the monstrous Toguro, Yusuke zoomed off to Genkai's place with pure determination to get stronger. And me, in all of my manga-loving wisdom, thought, I'm sick, training arc time. But Togashi said, no, and jumped right into the start of this tournament. This isn't the first time Togashi's done this throughout this story, but I think it actually works remarkably well here. This tournament is essentially throwing the characters, and by extension me, the reader, into totally uncharted territory. Toguro's insanely strong, but what about the other contestants? And with only the tiniest glimpse into what Yusuke and his team have achieved over the past 2 months, it leaves every moment of these early fights shrouded in uncertainty. Considering these are fights to the death, well, that sure does amp up the tension to a whole other level. In many ways, this almost feels like a sort of reset. Emerging from the forest with a mysterious partner, Yusuke feels so, different to the punk kid that defines so much of the prior material. Here he stands amidst a veritable army of demon onlookers and he's just calm. After a brief test of skills from Hiei, the gang hop onto a ship to take them to the tournament, but quickly they're faced with a surprise battle royale preliminary fight. Boy, does this feel familiar. Except one thing.
Spaghetti.
The purpose of all this mystique is actually quite clever. You see, had we seen the training our participants underwent to get here, as many manga would have chosen to do, by this stage we would be deeply familiar with our team's capabilities and all the excitement would fall on their opponent's inability to make good on that training. However, now, even our heroes act as a point of excitement and anticipation for us, in addition to whoever they may face. Much like Goku showing up to the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai after his mysterious training, only for us to turn each page with bated breath as he demonstrates just how far he's come, so too do we feel that with every single character on Team Urameshi. Taking that even further, Togashi ups the uncertainty by including a masked participant, one who seems pretty clearly to be Genkai, though that is quickly ruled out by Kuwabara and co suspecting the very same. It's all just very mysterious, and though I am still not 100% convinced the masked fighter isn't Genkai, all I'm really left to do is strap on my metaphorical seatbelt and find out.
NANI?
Uncertainty might as well be Togashi's middle name at this point, cause he sure ain't letting up with the rising tension here. As the gang relax in their hotel room, they're snuck up on by 2 members of the team they'll soon face in their first match, Rinku and Zeru. While narratively this scene exists to relay some tournament rules and intimidate Yusuke's team, what it's doing under the hood is what I find to be the most fascinating. On one level, it's indicating the level of skill in play here is beyond anything the gang have seen before. I mean, nobody noticed them sneak in. That's some creepy stuff right off the bat. But on the other hand, it's helping to build up this new Yusuke. He doesn't even stir from his sleep, leaving Zeru to essentially speak for the reader, quote, "Did he sense we didn't intend to attack, or..." And that's it. Or. That single word ensured that I was locked in for at least 100 more pages, and I'm not kidding. Does he just not even consider their power a threat? Just how much has Yusuke improved here? On top of everything else built up across these early pages, that alone is a thrilling question to have linger as we head into the very first match. When I first saw that a single tournament was going to span 60 chapters, on one hand, part of me worried that it would get stale after a while, but on the other hand, I was well aware of the tournament's positive reputation and wondered how on earth Togashi was going to pull this off. Is it going to evolve into a grander story, or is it going to be another situation where my experience doesn't quite map onto the wider fandoms? Well, I don't actually know. I write this as I read it, but what Togashi does do is establish a mechanic I've never seen in a tournament setting before, and one that offers endless possibilities to keep things fresh. The team captains must agree on what constitutes a battle and what counts as a win. If they can't agree on something, then each member fights one-on-one, effectively meaning no matter what the narrative demands, these battles can facilitate it. It's utterly genius, and what a spectacularly creative choice, and one that immediately doused my fears of the story ever feeling repetitive. And with the first matchup agreeing to a standard one-on-one bout, it's time to jump into battle. Team Urameshi versus Team Roku Yukai. In other stories I've read that fall within the battle shonen genre, one aspect that I look out for as the calling card of quality is the author's ability to interweave the story into the battles that take place. In the right hands, combat is very much the language of battle shonen, and only the best do it right. And right out the gate, Togashi wastes no time in declaring that he's no average mangaka. As I've mentioned, the ability to define the terms of battle affords each team's outing the chance to take whatever shape is best suited to whatever story Togashi is aiming to tell. And while I intend to talk about all of my favorite fights individually, I don't intend on covering the minutiae of every single battle because, well, there's a lot of them. For instance, this team battle, despite amounting to 4 separate matchups, really acts to establish the setting, the loose rules in play, and most importantly, to test just how far our heroes have come against foes that have already been established as formidable. In other words, this team battle is sort of Togashi's proof of concept for what will eventually, more or less, become the conclusion to this story. And it's delicious. Like I said, 2 of these team members sneak up on our heroes the night before. 2 enemies, one tall and another short, intimidating our heroes? Where have I seen that before? While the best battle of this early matchup is undoubtedly its climax, these early battles are nothing to scoff at either. Kuwabara steps up as the first combatant, putting himself at an immediate disadvantage against one of the only 2 named fighters on the opposing team. And what's more is, he loses. But what's masterful about this first outing isn't the result necessarily, but what the result communicates to us as readers and viewers. While Kuwabara did lose, it was a close match, and one that stood to convey both to his opponents, as well as us readers at home, that Team Urameshi is not quite as hopelessly outmatched as they may seem. Continuing this chaos, and to further establish Team Urameshi, we see the honorable Kurama face off against the dishonorable Roto, emphasizing the sort of lowlifes we stand to face in this tournament and the lengths they'll go to in order to secure the win. Even in a fight this seemingly unimportant, Togashi performs a narrative sleight of hand by setting up the expectation of Kurama as the honorable fighter, only to completely subvert that as he whips out scary plant no jutsu, it's pretty gnarly stuff, and equally importantly, tells us yet more about how far these heroes have come. In the spirit of keeping every fight feeling distinct, Hiei's bout is as short as it is cathartic. That is to say, very! I'll be the first to admit it here, I got off to a rough start with Hiei. As a character, I thought his first outing in the series was exceptionally weak compared to literally everything else that came afterwards. But it seems, in addition to this tournament being a sort of reset for Yusuke and the world around him, it also acts as a sort of reintroduction and reinvention of Hiei into a more traditional powerhouse-type character for the team. And it offers an interesting dynamic to spruce things up following the competitive and tense Kurama bout. What began as two mysterious individuals intimidating the hero team has now met a total role reversal. Hiei is a terrifyingly powerful ally, and with this little beloved Chaos Gremlin's victory, there are only 2 more members left of the enemy team. Oh, I guess I got ahead of myself. Yusuke versus Chu. Togashi sure as hell isn't hesitant in reminding us that this isn't your typical shonen battle tournament. There's a lot more room for, let's say, improvisation, which turns an already exciting contest into a thrilling spectacle. And if there were ever a contestant to throw things off kilter, it's this guy. This is Chu. Chu is a drunken master, a real brute, and enough of a threat to finally wake our hero up. Oh yeah, okay, here we go. Yusuke's up, and in spite of Chu's menacing presence, he claims this is going to be light work. You could already cut this tension with a knife, but what's so fascinating is the way Togashi uses the prior fights to build this one up further. It's not exactly uncommon in battle manga to have earlier fights appear easier, only for the final big bad to appear and surpass their strength. Heck, Kuwabara even addresses this, stating that things have basically been a joke up until now. But I love that Kurama steps in to subvert that very notion. Zeru, according to him, was a genuine threat. Hiei literally had to fall back on an imperfect technique that we now know cost him the full use of his arm. But in spite of all of this, we're told that Chu is somehow even worse. And that certainly doesn't take long to find out either, as Chu catches Yusuke off guard from the get-go. But what really stood out to me about this section is Togashi's artwork. I've noted the improvements to his writing so far, but it still cannot be understated just how much of a jump Togashi's paneling has seen in tandem. If we jump back only a few volumes, you'll find rigid battles with stubbier characters and fairly standard line work, which, don't get me wrong, looks fine, but doesn't exactly have a dramatic edge to it. It feels in line with the type of lighthearted work Togashi had been writing prior to this series. But with the prelude to this very arc, his work changed dramatically. Yusuke got taller, his hair got messier. It really started to look like a battle manga now. And as the dramatic battle begins with Chu, Togashi's training weights are fully off, and the master that blew my mind with the stunning HunterXHunter art is finally starting to emerge. The loose line work, the fluid gesture, not only did it fit the description of Chu's gliding moves, but it feels, huge. The impacts dance off the page, and the ink brush that defined much of HunterXHunter is starting to make an appearance now. The stuff is incredible, and I'm so glad the writing of this fight matches it. Not only did Yusuke block Chu's devastating kick with one arm, he walks that bitch off, fires a ray gun into the air just to show off his move, and then say he's only got 3 of his daily 4 limit left. What a baller! Yusuke is now dead. Behold, Chadsuke. I love that Togashi just won't stop playing with expectations also in this fight. First, Yusuke's overwhelmed. Then he's fine. Then he's showing off his power. And then, just to flip the battle on its head, Chu just laughs and powers up even further, conjuring a goddamn energy ball to rival Yusuke's ray gun. The ensuing clash of Reiki and Fist is so unbelievably good, and yet it ends in a total stalemate.
決着はナイフエッジデスマッチだ。ナイフエッジデスマッチ。ナイフエッジデスマッチ。Duelo a muerte con cuchillos.
I said you could cut the tension of this fight with a knife, and it's like Togashi heard me. The rule of being able to decide what constitutes a win was one I said fascinated me, and it didn't take long for that mechanic to come into play. Chu whips out 2 knives, driving them into the ground to mark the zones, and says that not only will the person who falls out of this lose, but they'll pay with their life. And best of all, with everyone's Reiki spent, this will be a battle of pure physical strength. I love this for so many reasons. I'm always a sucker for fights that fall down to mutual respect between battle-obsessed warriors, but to flip the script on the dynamic of the battle midway through is such a sick idea. It keeps things fresh, and to impose physical limitations like this just opens the doors for so many fascinating twists and turns. This battle explodes off the page. In spite of the lack of Reiki, it feels bigger than anything we've seen before. It is beyond brutal. Blood spurts from their heels against the knives with every crushing blow, culminating in the most insane headbutt. It's like time stops and everyone looks on unsure before Chu slumps to the floor, defeated. Covered in blood and bruises, Yusuke turns to Rinku and says, our main character, everyone. That genuinely is just straight up one of the best battles I've consumed in quite some time. It is such a spectacular reintroduction to this new version of Yusuke, and with this being only the climax of the first battle, it is so clear to me that not only am I in for a good time in this arc, but Togashi has completely emerged from his cocoon as a master of battle shonen. The purpose of the first team's battle was to establish the culture, rules, and atmosphere of this tournament itself, but this final fight was all of that in microcosm. A clash for the ages and one of the best fights I've ever seen. But again, that's not going to be the last time I'll say that in this video. Team Urameshi versus Team Ichigaki. With the first hurdle out of the way, that brings us to day 2 of the tournament, where Togashi introduces us to Team Ichigaki, who appears to be a head or two more barbaric than the last batch. But given their introduction is the most savage yet, showcasing the most brutal dismemberment, I figured we needed some levity in the room. But yes, these are the folks Team Urameshi are up against next, and things are not looking good here. Yusuke can't summon any aura after rapid firing his ray gun last round, Hiei's arm is beyond messed up, and they've just gotten the news that they'll be up against Team Toguro if they progress any further. But it gets even worse with Kurama and Hiei being ambushed, leaving the team with only 3 members. I figured after the setup of this team's brutality and Team Urameshi put on the back foot that Togashi was sort of gearing up for a sense of desperation, and that would be the linchpin in ensuring this next battle felt different from the prior. But I honestly could not have been more wrong, in fact. The emphasis of this section is hardly on the action itself. Heck, it's hardly on Team Urameshi at all. Kuwabara has a dream about a group of martial arts students lamenting their inability to pay for their sick master's treatment, only for someone called Ichigaki to roll up and offer to save him if they'll agree to take part in one of his experiments. Throughout these chapters, both Kurama and the masked fighter note that these opponents are definitely not here of their own volition, and so this 3-on-3 battle royale is no longer black and white. I adore that from a narrative point of view. The change in format was interesting enough, but to throw a moral conundrum into a deathmatch is amazing. Ichigaki is a real bastard, and so it really becomes less about the two teams facing each other and more about them as a collective versus this monstrous scientist and trying to figure a way out of this horrible situation. Now, don't get me wrong, the battle itself is still full of some great team-up moments, and Togashi even throws a spanner into the works when the masked fighter's shroud falls off, revealing not Genkai, but a young girl? What? But to me, it's learning about this team and how to get out of this situation that gave this segment of the tournament so much strength. After escaping their ambush, Hiei and Kurama literally drop into the arena and reveal the heinous crimes committed. Ichigaki caused their master to fall ill in the first place, and all in the name of creating that chance to perform this sick experiment. The mad scientist goes on further to reveal they're all infested with blood control nodes, and okay, I almost groaned thinking that this was one of those cases where the idiot monologuing villain was going to give away their key to victory, but thankfully Togashi's a bit better than that. And it turns out these things are permanent. You remove them and the host will die, and man, does the story get bleak from here on in. These poor martial artists cry out for death, quite literally crying blood through sheer desperation. And in response to this, Yusuke's rage knows no bounds as he accepts he will have to, no doubt, put these people down and out of their misery until... The masked fighter steps in. Without hesitation, she drives her hand into the hearts of the 3 opponents, casting Purify. And, well, I think it's probably clear where this is going. There's a death fake out for the 3, and Team Urameshi wins the fight. I was initially a little thrown off by how neatly this seemed to be tied up. Hiei and Kurama revealed they've found and cured the mentor. Yusuke obliterates the mad scientist, and hey, the 3 students are even alive. I was all prepared to criticize how convenient it all felt, and I suppose it still is to a certain extent, but I think the way it's conveyed stops it feeling cheap. The masked fighter reveals that what she did wasn't some miracle cure. It was a move that judges the host's souls, and if that soul is pure, any corruptions are purified. The 3 were only saved because they are, at their core, good people. people. With the sensei proclaiming pride in their incorruptible hearts, I just kinda got swept up in the poignancy of it all. Corruptible power is such a key theme of this arc, and to see such a positive resolution here was genuinely moving. I might not necessarily adore the way the pieces of this fight's resolution are put together, but when its emotional weight and development of the tournament's key themes are front and center like this, it's very easy to overlook any flaws. The quarterfinals, Shadow Channelers versus Team Urameshi. Yeah, if you thought that transition felt sudden, then you'd be right. The next fight starts right away, no breaks, and I really like how the narrative is taking every opportunity to make Team Urameshi's presence in this tournament feel completely stifling. They came into this as underdogs, and things sure take a turn for the worse here as the odds continue to be stacked against them. As Yusuke puts it, this tournament is just a grinder, and they're the meat. The Shadow Channelers are the most aesthetically consistent and mysterious so far, a disguise for a series of ninja demons that Kurama explains live exclusively for carnage. Nothing like bloodthirsty ninjas to up the ante. And to make matters worse, with Kuwabara down for the count last round and the rest of the team drained of energy, Team Urameshi isn't just the fish out of water team, they are completely outgunned. With only 3 members battle ready, Togashi's created a sense of well-earned tension, leaving me to wonder, how on earth are they going to get out of this one? Much like the last round, it's not so much the super entertaining battles that sit at the forefront of the narrative here, but instead it's what this matchup tells us about the tournament. In spite of everything against them, things are only getting worse. Genkai and Hiei are lured off to some medical tent to check their wounds, only to find themselves trapped there and deemed medically unfit to participate. And with Kuwabara out of action, this leaves only Yusuke and Kurama in a fit state to fight in this horrifically biased matchup. Mercifully, the format agreed upon is a series of one-on-one battles, a true battle of attrition, and boy, does it deliver in every sense of the word. Kurama steps up, assuring Yusuke he'll get them to reveal their strategies while the rest may very well fall on him. Kurama's first opponent is a brush wielder named Gamma, a body paint bearer whose ink, made from his own blood by the way, imparts curses upon those he marks. It is a brutal battle, one that pushes Kurama to the edge, and yet, despite winning, the markings left upon him keep his aura sealed for 10 minutes after Gamma's death. I am not kidding when I say this entire segment had me feeling like, Jesus, I hope Kurama can avoid dying long enough to get some points on the board here. Each battle just feels like the disadvantages continue to pile up for this poor guy. Up until now, I had enjoyed this character, but my emotional investment in him during this early tournament wasn't super in-depth just yet. But wow, does that change here. The next opponent is an ice demon called Toya, the top rank of those seen so far. He is fiendishly smart and opts to fully take advantage of Kurama's sealed away energy, instead attacking exclusively from afar. I love the contrast between Toya battling the time limit of the sealing mark and Kurama faced with enduring it. It is genuinely tense, and man, the way Kurama wins this is so big brain. Toya jumps in close for the finishing blow, only for Kurama to impale him out of goddamn nowhere. Turns out this sly fox infected his open wounds with his deadly vetch to take the win. I mean, you can't keep the aura in if it's bleeding out, so it all adds up. The absolute noggin on this lad. And if anything is apparent in this match is that Togashi really just revels in the suffering of it all. This should be, by right, the end of the fight. And yet... If there were ever a way to make me fall in love with a character, it's through these last stand moments. The sheer corruption running through this matchup is such a fascinating way of making it feel distinct from the other one-on-ones in the tournament thus far. And it really says a lot about how carefully Togashi considered each of these bouts, and most importantly, the character work within them. And that could not be more true than right here.
Nani?
This is how you bring a character back into play. Marrying Kurama's dire circumstances and Yusuke's personality into a bombastic interjection that shifts things up a gear. This is Yusuke. No matter the consequences, no matter what those in charge say, Yusuke will stand by and do the right thing, especially for his allies. This one shot of him silently aiming down Bakuken from the sidelines, all the while his teammate describes what's about to happen to him if he doesn't release Kurama, is seriously effective. With Yusuke taken to the stage, Togashi breaks the fourth wall as our hero utters, "I'll wrap this up in a 2-page spread." Where's the chat, Gaming? Where's the chat? There he is. There's my guy. The next fight against Jin is pure cinema. I mean, this dude is basically just a goofy Goku type who flies around enjoying the thrill of battle. It's a great bit of spectacle and some much needed levity after the intensity of Kurama's struggles. It results in a seemingly convincing win, leaving only one fight for the Shadow Channelers left, that being Risho. Fortunately for us, and unfortunately for our heroes, the way Togashi masterfully orchestrates the level of tension throughout this bout is crazy precise. This should carry with it the momentum forward of the tides turning in favor of Team Urameshi, but it doesn't. Under instructions from the higher-ups, Risho puts forth the case that Yusuke's victory should be disqualified on account of a slow count performed by the referee in the prior conflict. And given where this idea came from in the first place, those very powers that be naturally agree that this is the case. And just like that, it's over. What a slimy way to win. Okay, I wish I could tell you how goddamn ecstatic this made me. It literally caught me so off guard, filled me with so much adrenaline that I damn near hired a private investigator to hunt down Togashi's personal address so I could personally massage his aching back in thanks. This moment made me more hyped than just about any page of any manga I've ever read. And I am not just saying that. It's moments like this that remind me why I love the medium of manga so much. This act tells you everything you need to know about Kuwabara and why he's my new favorite character in this story. Definitively, there's no others. Being the strongest is cool, being the best designed is cool, and being kind is underrated. But seeing the weakest character on the team fearlessly step up to the plate when no one else can, all in the name of saving lives, knowing he's marching towards almost certain death himself, is one of the most powerful moments this series has conjured so far. Few stories can pull this off as effectively as this can. Thousands of people have claimed over the years that this is the best tournament arc in the medium, and as I read this, I'm finding it increasingly hard to argue against that point. This is phenomenal and earned in every conceivable respect. And in addition to all of that, in the heat of this courageous moment, Kuwabara utters perhaps my favorite line in this entire manga. I'd love to bust this place open myself, but can't we show these cheating scumbags, even at our worst, we're better. Maybe it's because I'm a sap, maybe it's the climate we live in these days, but those words Kuwabara uttered to Yusuke legitimately made me emotional while I was reading. During these matchups, the most prejudiced and crooked set of encounters, Kuwabara chooses to be better. In a world where we glorify an eye for an eye as long as it aligns with our own ideologies, this sentiment was one that hit me right in the feels when I needed it the most. We need to celebrate more heroes like this. It should go without saying that this stunning moment results in a victory for Team Urameshi. How could it not? And yet the moment is one of perfect comedy. A brutal one-hit KO upon Kuwabara noticing Yukine has arrived in the arena. Silly doesn't even begin to cut it, and yet I think it was perhaps the very best choice Togashi could have ever made. The scope and emotional weight of these matchups continues to grow, and with each passing round and with each singular moment topping anything prior, I wait with bated breath as to what lies ahead of me here. Yusuke's training. In Battle Shonen, training sequences or reprieves from battle have become a staple of the genre. A sort of prolonged period of struggle used to position the main character for an upcoming conflict in line with the themes of the story. Dragon Ball most notably has a great many training arcs, Naruto too, heck, even HunterXHunter has them. But what I found interesting about this particular one with YuYu Hakusho's is the timing of the training itself. There have been plenty of opportunities for Yusuke and his allies to train. We've even been told that this training has taken place, or at worst, it's been suggested at. But it always remained off-screen. It almost suggests that these moments aren't important, however, nothing could be further from the truth. For a writer, the acts of including and excluding something are both creative choices. Choices that serve a specific purpose. We see Goku learn the Spirit Bomb on King Kai's planet, but nothing is shown of the Kaioken up until the moment it's used in battle. It creates narrative mystique around it. All the while, with the Spirit Bomb, we understand it completely and are aware of it in Goku's back pocket. When the Kaioken appears, we're shocked. And when the last-ditch Spirit Bomb is used, We feel the tension, well aware of how long it takes for Goku to build that monster up. What was seen and ultimately unseen was purposely weaved that way for surprise and tension, and Togashi has used that to great effect so far. We stepped into this tournament with no idea of what Yusuke learned off screen, and that provided great payoff with awesome surprises, but now Togashi gives the reader a direct view of the training for a very specific reason. This intense struggle Yusuke undertakes is important to witness, both in terms of setup for future plot points and what it does thematically. The training itself is framed as the last test Genkai will ever give Yusuke, insinuating that either she won't be long for this world or Yusuke will simply have no need for her any longer. At any rate, she continues to talk about the natural order of things, how as you get older you gain wisdom and experience, but those years also rob you of your natural strength. Quote, "Nature gives us our time, and then we step aside for the next generation." Nestled within this conversation, Togashi plants a single panel of Toguro during all of this, almost as if it were included by mistake. But then she asks Yusuke an important question.
強くなりたいという気持ち、今も同じか？
ああ、前よりでけえクレイだ。
どんなことにも耐えられるか？
なんだろうがな。
This is a test. A test to confirm something yet unknown to us as a reader, but for whatever reason Genkai needs to know where Yusuke's true values lie. Would he really do anything for power? He says that he will, so Genkai tests that very theory, asking him to kill her. Suddenly, it starts to rain heavily, as if to mimic the storm of confusion whirling within Yusuke's mind. It's a dilemma with a clear outcome, but his moral compass prevents him from taking action. He's forced to contend with where he as a human draws that line, and as he crosses the threshold into the calm atmosphere of the cave out of the storm, suddenly it all becomes clear. This test wasn't trying to measure if Yusuke could follow through on a harrowing act in the name of the greater good. It was a test to see if he was indeed a moral person, someone deserving of Genkai's power. Revealingly, in this circumstance, Yusuke was again presented with a dilemma. In order to accept this power, Yusuke needs to risk his life. According to Genkai, there's a high likelihood of a horrible death if you're not strong enough to accept this power. So naturally, Yusuke has two options here: to take it or not, but he doesn't even hesitate. However, it's not for nothing. He knows that in order to stand a chance at competing against Toguro, he needs to get stronger. A lot stronger. He won't kill someone for that chance, but he will risk his own life because those he cares about are counting on him. And by far and away, my favorite aspect of this entire struggle Yusuke quietly endures in this cave is the consequence of the egg. Earlier in the tournament, Koenma Jr. makes an appearance in an all-new getup and hands Yusuke the very egg he was tasked to protect in the very first arc that he forgot about. This egg feeds off of Yusuke's aura and will hatch into something depending on the content of Yusuke's character. And well, when it does hatch, it's this hilarious looking creature. However, lying there in the cave having collapsed in agony, Yusuke appears to be losing this internal fight. Maybe he can't accept this power. Maybe he's not the right person. He needs water. He's going to die. For as silly as this thing looks, this is the living manifestation of all the good that Yusuke is and stands to offer the world. He arrives in the nick of time to offer aid, helping Yusuke make it to the other side of this in what little way it can. It's a wonderful metaphor that demonstrates that not only is Yusuke now ready for the next challenge, but Genkai didn't make a mistake by choosing him as her successor. What uplifts Yusuke isn't a self-serving desire, but instead a deep compulsion and need to protect others. A trait demonstrated through his action for his teammates, his desire to help that little creature Pooh, and of course, Keiko. Yusuke's come a long way since the first chapter of this story. And so, this moment exists to make a point, a pivotal one, and one I'd like to save for the epic conclusion of this wonderful arc. Fractured Fairy Tales and Team Urameshi. With Yusuke's training underway, Togashi plays around with structure for the first time in this tournament. Throughout the aforementioned section, the battle between the rest of Team Urameshi and their current opponents, the Fractured Fairy Tales, is well underway, and Togashi cuts between the two plot points for a very specific reason. This matchup isn't really about some narrative within the battles themselves like everything up until this point has been. Instead, it exists to establish where everyone's power is at. Hiei obliterates his first opponent and then pulls off the most insane victory against the next, showcasing a flame-infused aura sword, a glimpse of just how deep his connection to the flame goes. Kurama's battle exhibits the most stunning of showcases, with his enemy using a reverse magic box, an item pulled from folklore that rewinds age on anyone affected by its smoky contents. Intent on taking Kurama back to a child in hopes of beating him then, instead it reverts him back to his terrifyingly powerful fox form, with a moment of tension when he realizes he's doomed without mastery of this form. And yet, interestingly, we see little of Kuwabara, instead playing up his segment for jokes as the enemy repeatedly teleports him away from the battlefield. Instead of this, it shows Genkai effortlessly clear the battle. It had me questioning why Togashi was doing this beyond comedy, an answer I will soon find in the finale. And with the following segment revolving around a showcase of Togoro's team ruthlessly dispatching their opponents, I think it's pretty clear to see the contrast Togashi's trying to create here. This is where everyone stands. Their strengths, their weaknesses, the uncertainty of their trump cards, all set against a backdrop of Yusuke struggling harder than any of them to achieve his goal. But it's what occurs immediately after this that really ties this all together and creates the most nail-biting tension possible going into the climax. Genkai versus Toguro. It's difficult to downplay just how vital this segment is to the broader story. It's the convergence and coming together of two characters who played bit roles in prior arcs, now acting as the glue that elevates this from a very fun tournament to one I'll think about for many years to come. An ever-present mystery surrounding the masked fighter in this arc has been that of their identity, and the subversion that took place when she was initially revealed to be much younger looking during combat. In the hands of a lesser writer, this mystery would have remained just that, and no one would have minded. However, Togashi decided to leverage that very surprise into a mechanism that ties everything thematically together with Toguro. In this arc, both Toguro and Genkai represent two opposing sides to a particular argument this arc is trying to resolve. Having trained in martial arts together as they grew up, a darkness brought on by the natural passage of time crept into Togoro's mind. All of that power he spent his life acquiring. He doesn't want to give it up. He doesn't want to stand aside for the next generation, choosing instead to sell his soul to the devil in order to retain his youthful demeanor and his strength, becoming the very monster that haunts Yusuke in this arc. As seen earlier, Genkai's powers are inextricably tied to her youthful appearance, meaning while she hands down her power for Yusuke to inherit, she is also openly communicating that it's not her youth that's valuable, it's the values Yusuke holds that are. There will always be need for good values, there will always be more youth to inherit it. It's not important for her to retain her power and her youth. Part of the circle of life is for the old and wise to hand down that wisdom to the young to carry forth, that what we should encourage is kindness, not greed. This isn't how these sorts of stories go. Just mere seconds ago during the tournament, I spoke of how that entire segment was designed to give us an idea of where the gang is currently, to establish a narrative foothold from which we can launch into the finals on. For Genkai to die in her pupil's arms at this moment, while tragic, while serving to demonstrate how reprehensible and lost Toguro is, it also completely undoes all certainty going forward, which is perfect. The build-up to this moment is solemn. Hiei struggles to match the power of Toguro despite his determination. Even through image training, Kurama cannot even dream of besting Karasu. Yusuke sits in the aftermath of Genkai's death, staring at the cave his master set him upon. It's a series of stark and depressing moments that emphasize the feeling of all hope being lost so incredibly well. But I think where Togashi in his later years might have left this hopelessness to linger, he's careful in instilling a sense of hope on this occasion. A contestant from the prior round reveals a history with Toguro and hands Kurama and Kuwabara 2 items to aid in their battle. A potion form of what restored Kurama's fox powers, and a magical hilt for Kuwabara said to unleash a blade modeled on the nature of the one who wields it. And while these are physical manifestations of hope to turn the tides, it's Koenma's delivery of Genkai's final message that reignites Yusuke's own hope. Don't cross over, just win.
It's a moment of truth and the moment to lie and the moment to live and the moment to die, the moment to fight, the moment to fight,
Get on Exo Baba!
This powerful response is a culmination of these moments, a message to Toguro and his gang that they will not be beaten down by tragedy. Instead, this is the spark that will ignite a fire under them and lead them to victory. Team Urameshi versus Team Toguro. These battles kick off with so much energy. With Karasu and Kurama taking to the arena first, it's a brutal display and one of nail-biting intensity. Togashi drops a detail that the ingestible version of the fox form restoration magic takes a while to kick in, and so this battle is one long waiting game. And boy oh boy, when it finally does kick in, the imagery is incredible, and yet somehow this doesn't bring about victory as I was expecting. Karasu's own trick up his sleeve is equally as impressive, and with Kurama seemingly knocked out of his own fox form, Togashi has ramped up the tension to all new heights. This is all in service of creating a moment I wasn't convinced by at first. With Kurama out of all options, he's forced to use a move that will end his own life, and he does just that. He uses everything he has to summon a devastatingly powerful blow against Karasu, and wins. Except he doesn't die. The potion's effects in fact return him to his human body, a reunification of Kurama's human form and the fox spirit. At first, I can't say I loved this. It seemed to me like a sudden and convenient victory, but upon closer inspection, it dawned on me that this was earned. This was a full circle moment, once a fox spirit who gave up his power reluctantly accepting humanity to survive, now willing to give up his life for others and rewarded with the restoration of his fox demon self. And Hiei's battle against Bui is ultimately no different. With Kurama deemed the loser due to some nonsensical technicality, Hiei puts himself forward to take on this brute despite aspirations to fight Toguro. He yields this right to Yusuke. For Genkai's sake, he says. This change in Hiei is hardly a new one. We've seen this through his actions in this arc already, but to hear it voiced is a powerful moment. Hiei has been characterized through selfishness and a desire to dominate. His very own technique was understood to be about mastery over demonic fire, the Black Dragon. Time and time again he failed, almost losing his arm in the process, but here he masters it. Not through domination, but through acceptance. In some respects, him and the Black Dragon become one, and it's that enhancement from within that leads to victory. It's a stunning moment of poetry and a real high point for this tournament. Perhaps more than anyone, it's Kuwabara's match that feels the most overt in its conveyance of character work. The elder Toguro morphs into versions of Genkai, mocking not just her death, but Kuwabara's inability to understand the reality of her absence in this round. This entire battle is a test of character, of perseverance and hardiness in the face of adversity. And despite Kuwabara's presence always on the lighter side of things in this tournament, there's an intentional and uncharacteristic gravitas to this victory that really spoke to me. Not in the act itself, but the aftermath. Kuwabara berates and rages at Yusuke for not telling him about Genkai, and after Yusuke wistfully recounts his reasoning, Kuwabara turns away, and in one of the most stunning panels of this chapter, he says only 2 words. Beat him. With those powerful words echoing through his mind, Yusuke is now ready and steps up to face Toguro. is, without a doubt, one of the greatest battles I've ever seen illustrated. Jumping up to 80% from the start, Togashi illustrates Toguro with the most insane brushwork I've ever seen. This man is a hulking monstrosity that physically looms over Yusuke from page to page. The speed from panel to panel is honestly startling, and as things ramp up, Togashi falls back on looser shapes to contrast Toguro's terrifying agility in contrast to robust illustrative close-ups found elsewhere. And that's not even mentioning the way this battle is choreographed. There are upside-down ray guns, arena-destroying blasts, and oh my god, it has the classic I was holding back all this time moment when Yusuke drops his aura handcuffs. This is battle shonen beauty. Toguro's jump to his 100% form is just insane. Look at these pages. Look at them. It is pure, unadulterated talent from Togashi spilling out of every single panel. And what's more is, my man Toguro blocks a blast with a single shout before uttering the coldest line I've ever read. I love this. I love this. I almost lost my damn mind when he seemingly took out Kuwabara. The resulting moments are so beyond breathtaking. This is genuine battle shonen perfection. And yet, in spite of all this stunning spectacle, this is only a tiny fraction of why I adore this fight.
てめえが捨てたものの重みがようやく分かったぜ。俺は捨てねえ。
During my reviews, I often feel compelled to delve into the past of the artists behind the stories I'm covering, hoping to get a snapshot into the mind and soul that's invited me into his world through his stories. However, during my coverage of HunterXHunter, Yoshihiro Togashi intimidated me, or rather his approach to manga creation did. You gotta remember, because this is my job and I set myself a reading goal every week to hit, when I cover a new story, I effectively throw myself into that world entirely, day after day, until it's done. And chapter after chapter and arc after arc, as the weeks ticked on by, I could feel the thin veil of happiness and joy that informed HunterXHunter's early chapters slowly give way and reveal the true bedrock of that story. The complicated emotional distress of its creator permeated every page, every pen stroke, every single word. To say that it caused me distress by the finish would be an understatement. When you hang around negativity all day, you start to feel the same way. And in an effort to prevent that from happening further to myself, I stopped looking into Togashi altogether. So much so that had it not been for the comments under those very reviews, I would never have known that there was a series called YuYu Hakusho associated with him in the first place. However, I fixed that during my coverage of this arc. As I noted last week, in the same way that I could see how much YuYu Hakusho had influenced or set the groundwork for HunterXHunter, this week I can see just how much Togashi's earlier work, 10-Day Shoaru Cupid, influenced this magnificent series YuYu Hakusho, and indeed the final matchup with Toguro himself. 10-Day Shoaru Cupid is a 4-volume romance manga chronicling the life of a young boy and a devil girl. That description feels totally analogous to what Togashi is known for nowadays. However, the fingerprints of that subtle appreciation for the human condition and emotion have always lingered long after the series concluded. It's no secret that accepting a surface-level observation as a reader of Togashi's stories betrays an ignorance of the beauty his work stands to offer. Informing every seemingly light-hearted action in HunterXHunter is a quiet sadness, and underneath every uplifting crescendo in YuYu Hakusho is a peaceful serenity and appreciation for the finer details. To a passive observer, Yusuke vs. Toguro is simply a story's hero overcoming the crude brute in the name of what is right. And there's certainly some truth to that. But like I said moments earlier, accepting just that as the substance of this story betrays an ignorance of what Yoshihiro Togashi is capable of giving you. I've seen a few folks online describe this arc as aimless or lacking in substance. And when you consider that there's a looming threat revealed moments before the final that we haven't been privy to through Mr. Sakyo, I can sort of understand how some people might feel that way about it. However, for me, I honestly felt that it was not only a phenomenally well written and well conceived of ending, but it was in fact one of the most effectively uplifting endings in an arc I've read ever. And what's more is, The other fights surrounding it and building up to this clash echo the sentiments contained therein. In one way or another, these individual fights speak to a choice or some element of Team Urameshi's past. Kurama vs Karasu and Hiei vs Bui both feature our heroes contending with the choices or circumstances of their past, both displayed in very different ways, resulting in very different outcomes. A former fox spirit struggling to reignite the power that once defined him, forced to rely on his own selfless and sacrificial nature to make up the difference. And a demon, once shackled by a desperate gambit, now having mastered the unthinkable, culminating in one of the most satisfying conclusions to any of the fights, except for one. Yusuke versus Toguro. Our true main event, and the climax of not just this arc, but the manga up until this point. This fight is a masterpiece, and I don't throw that word around lightly. Masterpieces in Battle Shonen are sort of rare by design. They are often the culmination of everything concerning the themes, story, and participants involved up until that point in the manga. Everything converges in one perfectly powerful point, leaving everything on the page with nothing held back. Only a few fights come to mind when I consider this criteria. Goku versus Vegeta is an obvious one. The proud Saiyan elite versus the lower class commoner. And in the end, it's what made Goku who he was that ultimately made the difference in that clash of ideologies. This is all to say, of course, that for a masterpiece of Battle Shonen to be considered such, it needs to say something more than just the fighting itself. Something about the characters, the themes, and on some level has to create a powerful and resonant connection between itself and us reading along. Yusuke versus Toguro is that masterpiece. Mechanically speaking, how these two characters and their personalities are designed and complement each other lends itself poetically in some ways to what Togashi is trying to achieve with this final battle. Consider this: the inciting incident that launches this story into full swing is a single choice Yusuke makes. A choice to save a small child from being hit by a car. He didn't need to do this, but who he is forced him to act. This paired with his loud, crass, bad boy demeanor, and you've got for yourself someone who feels very much like an active character within his story. One that dictates where it goes and drives it forward. And then he meets Toguro at the end of the last arc. I'm not talking about this meeting, I'm talking really meeting the real Toguro when he challenges him to the tournament proper. Yusuke is abjectly terrified, triggering a fear response and urgency within him that pushes him to seek out Genkai for more strength, more power. And as the arc begins, we see he's achieved just that. There's something totally different about Yusuke in this moment. He's different. He's changed. And this fact is tangibly tackled at two separate instances during the story itself. I'll touch on the most obvious first.
今なんつった？
私を殺さねばこの試練は乗り越えられん。
So this is one of the most pivotal moments in the arc's second half, one that plays into the finish beautifully and one that serves to reaffirm for us who Yusuke is. And this is important because that's actually a massive part of this manga story, and most importantly, the climax itself. Unable to accept who he is, what he is, Toguro rejects the natural order of things, rejecting the person that he is in favor of gaining everything he desires. Power, and lots of it. In the pursuit of eternal youth and this great selfish power, he's forced to relinquish his own humanity, his allies, himself in the process. This, we later learn, is what Genkai is testing Yusuke with by asking him to kill her. It's his final test. Having rushed to her side, driven by fear following Toguro's challenge, Yusuke, much like Toguro, has been driven by a desire to get stronger. But will he do anything to get stronger? No. Not anything. In a moment of utter dialogue poetry, Togashi pens a response so perfect for Yusuke's character to utter, it both made me laugh and gave me chills all at once. In response to her request to kill her, he simply says, "I'm gonna have to fail this test. It won't be the last." Chef's kiss. And through choosing this path, Yusuke proves that he's indeed the right person to inherit Genkai's energy. But I digress. Why bring this up at all? Well, From the get-go, I sort of saw Toguro as what Yusuke could have been if he were morally bankrupt enough or desperate enough to allow his darkest desires to dictate who he was. And in the end, it was that comparison that was made between the two and the differences that were emphasized that made their final fight as compelling as it ultimately was for me. But I was only half right in my estimation, because I actually totally misread what sort of character Yusuke was. In the closing moments of the fight, Toguro taunts Yusuke by insinuating that he is similar to himself, and I could almost see that being the case. They both appear to be active and abrasive characters willing to push for strength to achieve their goals. However, there was a fundamental difference at play here, one that I didn't fully appreciate until the very end, because Yusuke isn't an active character at all. The group of Botan, Yusuke's mom, and Keiko flounder around a lot in this arc, with their main purpose being a cheers section for Togashi to cut to in order to add some variety to the commentary on each fight they view. But there is one vital piece of story offered by Keiko when she arrives at the tournament grounds. She says that she doesn't want to stop Yusuke from participating, despite her desire for him to be safe, because he looks like he's happier here. It's a blink and you miss it moment, but it speaks to the core of Yusuke, I think, quite profoundly. Despite being surrounded by monsters, Yusuke only has eyes for his friends' safety. For the first time in his life, he feels as though he has a purpose, which, if you cast your minds back, stands in stark contrast to how he was depicted in the very first chapter, where he, in a sort of apathetic way, didn't see the urgency or need to even come back to life at all. His opinion on what he offered the world had been molded by the teachers, fellow students, and other kids in his life telling him consistently that he was nothing more than a bad kid, a torment and drain on society. But in this group of misfits, he's found a place that not only he can do well in, but in fact contribute good to also. And so, in what I had initially thought was a clash of two individuals with similar motivations, valuing different things, in the end, it actually amounted to a coming together of two polar opposite forces. And this is reflected in the art direction of the fight too, where Toguro is penned in this sharp, vicious, and almost uncomfortable detail countless times over. Yusuke is the embodiment of tranquility. Like Toguro is a hurricane and Yusuke the eye of that hurricane. During this battle, it's revealed that Toguro, the man who sold his soul for his own selfish desires, actually does have some minor redemption in the end. A doubt, or guilt rather, that's informed his actions. His pursuit of someone stronger enough to give him what he thinks he deserves. And the boy who once had nothing to live for, who was convinced he was a waste of space, finally found his reason to live. Not just for others, but for himself also. He found where he belongs. He was never a bad kid. He was always a misunderstood hero who would sooner throw his own life into the line of fire than to risk anyone else's. The climax of this fight isn't a full circle moment for either character. It's a realization and acceptance of who they each are, and there's something remarkably poignant about that. And so, in the same way that those in Yusuke's life took him at face value and misjudged him, characterizing him as nothing more than a bad kid, so too does Yoshihiro Togashi's magnificent Dark Tournament arc offer a subtly sophisticated story, rich with heart, waiting to be appreciated. You just have to be open to seeing it. In conclusion, the epilogue to this arc is one of redemption. One characterized by a brief conversation between Toguro and Genkai in the afterlife. A moment that solidifies the themes of this arc and offers a heart-wrenching final word from Toguro. Quote, "Sorry to have been so much trouble." It's a beautiful bow on this gift of an arc, and a moment that truly solidified my feelings towards this tournament. My only understanding going into this story was that this arc was considered a masterpiece of the genre, and as I write this on the other side of having experienced it, I can confidently say Togashi lived up to and surpassed those very expectations on every conceivable level. But I can't help but look at this story and comparisons made by its fans to other tournaments within the medium without feeling like they're missing the forest for the trees. Dragon Ball's Tenkaichi Budokai, My Hero Academia's Sports Festival arc, countless tournaments exist in Battle Shonen, but they all have such unique tonality and aims that I find the comparisons odd, superficial even. The equivalent of comparing Wall-E and Aliens simply because they're both set in space. YuYu Hakusho's Dark Tournament was every bit the arc that it was promised and then some. It's a sophisticated and elegant execution of a classic tournament archetype that oozes with the flashes of greatness that made HunterXHunter a household name. It's a masterpiece of battle shonen storytelling, a compelling character study, and boasted more incredible artwork than I've ever seen from Togashi on such a consistent basis. But I wonder, does its emphasis on character complexity make it inherently superior to works less interested in such an approach? Or is it just different? As I prepare for the final stretch of this magnificent story, I'd be curious to hear what you think in that regard. YuYu Hakusho is incredible, and I will see you all next time for the thrilling conclusion to this incredible story.